The German weapons genius is the most overhyped myth of the last century. While the rest of the world was simplifying production, the Germans were playing watchmakers, turning every pistol into a gold ingot. They didn't build the army of the future. They created a manufacturing hell that devoured Germany from the inside faster than enemy tanks ever could. Germany lost the technology war in the drafting bureaus. While the Allies were stamping out cheap, reliable steel by the millions, the Reich trembled over every screw. We are used to the image of soldiers with flawless barrels, but the reality was logistical chaos. Soldiers at the front received a wild mix of 19th century museum pieces, temperamental toys for officers, and junk cobbled together in basements at the war's end. We are going to gut this arsenal and show the uncensored truth, from overpriced pistols that jammed from a speck of dust to glass mines and surrogate rifles for suicide squads. This isn't just a list of hardware, it's a chronicle of how vaunted quality turned into a useless fetish and led an army to its inevitable end. The Luger, a trophy of failure. Let's start with the most coveted trophy of the war. Its silhouette is recognizable to everyone, but few know that this pistol was a primary nightmare for its own owners. Why did the Luger, hunted by every intelligence agency in the world, turn out to be a useless piece of iron in a real fight? American GIs went crazy for the Luger P-08, risking their heads for the prized trophy, but the Germans themselves got rid of this legend at the first opportunity. The beautiful silhouette hid a finicky mechanism that turned into a useless brass knuckle after the first handful of sand hit the trench. The Luger P-08 is a triumph of engineering and a total failure for real warfare. Its famous toggle lock action required such jewelry-level precision that producing one pistol cost a fortune. In the mud of the Eastern Front, the Luger died quickly and irrevocably. Realizing the army was armed with expensive toys, the Wehrmacht ordered the Walther P-38. The Walther was cruder, cheaper, and, most importantly, it worked even when its owner was knee-deep in a swamp. By 1945, the P-38 became the true steel fist of the infantry, while Lugers remained merely pretentious decorations on officers' belts. Killers in the shadows. But if the Walther was the workhorse, there were models created exclusively to hide in the shadows. Tiny barrels for those who decided the fate of the world in Gestapo offices or parachuted behind enemy lines. Do you know which pistol became the final argument in the Führer's bunker? The little Walther PPK isn't just a gun from spy movies. It was the favorite toy of Gestapo executioners and high-ranking SS officials. Its tiny caliber didn't stop it from becoming the bloodiest tool of the home front and, in the end, putting a full stop to the history of Hitler himself. While the infantry trudged through the mud with heavy Walthers, the Reich elite preferred comfort. The Walther PP and its shortened version, the PPK, were so compact they could be carried in a trouser pocket. But don't let their elegance fool you. These were the barrels used to shoot enemies of the people in the dungeons of the secret services. Parallel to this, the monstrous Mauser C-96, nicknamed the broom handle, was living out its days at the front. This relic from the 19th century with its massive wooden holster stock looked ridiculous, but its cartridge could pierce almost anything. Despite the ancient design, it continued to be issued to those for whom modern weapons were unavailable. It was an arsenal of contrasts, elegant killers in offices and heavy antiques in the hands of rearguard units. The SMG myth, stamped tin and bakelite pistols, however, were just the prelude. When it was time to turn the enemy into Swiss cheese in seconds, the Germans brought out what the movies mistakenly call the Schmeisser. Are you ready to find out why the famous MP40 was actually made of cheap bakelite and stamped sheet metal? Forget the myth of German submachine gunners hosing everything down with Schmeissers. Hitler was never able to arm every soldier with an automatic, and what you saw in the movies was stamped tin and bakelite that Hugo Schmeisser never even held in his hands. The Reich's real breakthrough wasn't future tech, but the ability to make weapons out of garbage. The MP38 was too expensive a luxury with its machined receiver and longitudinal ribs. Therefore, the Germans switched to the MP40, a design simplified to the limit using stamped steel. No wood, just cheap plastic and metal. Its folding stock was constantly wobbling, and the 32-round magazine often jammed from the slightest misalignment. Nevertheless, this ersatz became the symbol of blitzkrieg. It was designed for paratroopers and tank crews where every centimeter counts, but it ended up being the dream of any infantryman tired of cycling the bolt on an old rifle. The Rolls-Royce of the SS, but while the infantry was happy with the stamped MP40, the elite SS units were losing their minds over the Rolls-Royces of the submachine gun world. Weapons machined from solid blocks of steel and sold for insane prices. Why did the Germans need antique monsters from the First World War? While the regular Wehrmacht settled for cheap stampings, the SS elite snatched up the golden submachine guns. The MP34 was of such high quality and so expensive that it was called the Rolls-Royce of weapons. The Germans spent a fortune on it while their own economy was bursting at the seams. Germany was never able to bring its arsenal to a single standard. Alongside modern models, anything that could fire was used. In the hands of rear-line troops and garrisons, the MP-18, the grandfather of all submachine guns, which remembered the trenches of WWII, frequently appeared. Its improved version, the MP-28, was actively used at the start of the war despite its outdated look. A special case was the MP-34 and MP-35. These weren't just shooting irons, they were masterpieces of metalworking. The SS loved them for their exceptional reliability and accuracy, though they were poorly suited for mass warfare due to their exorbitant price and manufacturing complexity. Bolt handle on the right, magazines on the left, this chaos of models created a nightmare for supply lines, yet the Reich continued to cling to elite toys even when the front needed millions of simple barrels. But all that pretension ended when the Reich's factories were turned to rubble. The Germans had to forget about quality and start blatantly stealing ideas from their enemies. What did the Frankenstein gun, cobbled together from scraps of water pipes in the final months of the war, look like? When Hitler's invincible machine went off the rails, the pride of German engineers was flushed down the toilet. The MP-3008 wasn't a weapon, it was a confession of industrial impotence. A bare water pipe with a magazine welded to it, handed to a suicide squad member 5 minutes before his death. In 1945, the Reich had no time for aesthetics. German factories lay in ruins, and Berlin took a humiliating step. They copied the British Sten, which they had previously despised for its primitiveness. Thus was born the MP-3008. It didn't have a single unnecessary part, no surface finishing, no ergonomics, just crude welding and cheap steel. The magazine was stuck vertically downward just to somehow distinguish it from the original. It was a weapon of last hope, stamped out in basements and garages. It often fired on its own if dropped, but no one cared. The owner of such a submachine gun wasn't expected to survive longer than one battle anyway. The bolt-action death sentence. But if submachine guns turned into trash at the end of the war, what was happening with the primary infantry weapon? Why did millions of German soldiers continue to cycle the bolt of an old rifle while they were being mown down by Soviet semi-automatics? Was the vaunted Mauser really as good as the textbooks lie about? While Soviet and American soldiers showered the enemy with lead from semi-automatics, the German infantryman was forced to frantically work the bolt after every shot. The Kar-98K was 19th century technology that Hitler forced his army to drag through the entirety of World War II, signing a death warrant for his soldiers in every close-quarters engagement. The Wehrmacht's main rifle, the Kar-98K, was reliable and accurate, but hopelessly outdated. 5 rounds in the magazine and manual reloading, in 1943, this looked like a cruel joke. German generals slept through the moment when war became automatic. Attempts to fix the situation led to the WWII, an over-engineered mechanical freak that jammed from a single speck of dust. Only when the Germans captured Soviet SVT-40S did they realize how to build a proper weapon. By copying the Russian gas system, they created the WWII. It was powerful and effective, but production began too late and in numbers too small to save the freezing infantry in the trenches. The STG-44, the Forbidden Revolution. Yet, when the situation at the front became catastrophic, the Germans achieved the impossible. They created a weapon that the entire world copies today. Why did the Führer ban the rifle that could have changed the course of history, and how did engineers trick him? The Sturmgewehr 44 was a weapon Hitler personally banned, considering it useless junk. While the Führer threw tantrums in meetings, engineers were clandestinely stamping out the rifle that years later would become the blueprint for every assault rifle on the planet, including the legendary AK-47. The STG-44 was a true shock for the Allies. The Germans were the first to realize infantry doesn't need a long-range sniper rifle, they need a wall of fire at medium range. The intermediate cartridge concept allowed for the creation of a monster that hit more accurately than a submachine gun and faster than a rifle. But while elite units mowed down entire platoons with the STG, something else was being prepared for the ordinary cannon fodder. The Volkssturmgewehr 1.5 was the polar opposite of German genius. A crude semi-automatic for the old men of the militia, assembled from cheap tin and rivets. There wasn't a gram of aesthetics in it, just a primitive mechanism capable of firing a dozen shots toward advancing tanks before the shooter was crushed by their treads. Hitler's buzzsaw. But if the Sturmgewehr was an innovation, the next specimen was a true embodiment of horror. A weapon nicknamed the Scythe of Death for its insane rate of fire. Are you ready to hear why Hitler's machine gun made enemy soldiers literally hug the ground at the mere sound of it? The sound of this machine gun didn't resemble gunshots. It sounded like tearing canvas or a giant circular saw. 1,500 rounds per minute. The MG-42 didn't just fire, it literally cut people in half, turning enemy positions into mincemeat before the soldiers could even realize where death was coming from. German infantry was built around one god, the machine gun. The MG-34 was a masterpiece, accurate, versatile, and incredibly complex. But it was too delicate for the mud of the Eastern Front and required so much time to produce that the Wehrmacht began to choke from a lack of barrels. The solution was the legendary MG-42. Engineers threw out the jewelry-grade machining and replaced it with crude stamping. The barrel would overheat in seconds, turning into a glowing rod of scrap metal, but replacement took only moments. The gunner didn't care about the barrel's lifespan. His task was to create a wall of lead through which no living soul could pass. This machine gun became the most effective mass-killing tool in the Reich's arsenal, working flawlessly from African sands to the snows near Moscow. Pocket artillery and bouncing Bettys. But when bullets weren't enough, pocket artillery came into play, turning every building into a deadly trap. A weapon that hopped up before exploding to leave no chance for anyone within range. Have you ever heard the sound of bouncing Betty's death jump? If you saw the German grenade on a long handle and thought it was just a convenient design, you were wrong. This potato masher was created to hurl death further than any other soldier in the world could. But the true nightmare was the S-mine, or bouncing Betty, a mine that didn't explode under your foot, but politely hopped up to the level of your crotch before turning everything around it into a bloody mess. The steel hand granite 24 is the quintessential symbol of the German infantryman. Its long wooden handle acted as a lever. While the enemy was frantically tossing their pineapples, the German was hurling his grenade 40 meters out. But the Reich didn't stop at just throwing explosives. They turned mining into a perverted art form. The S-mine, the infamous Betty, was engineered to maim crowds. Upon activation, it would shoot a meter into the air and spray hundreds of steel balls. The Allies hated it more than the machine guns. And for those who wanted to take out a tank single-handedly, there was the Goliath, a tiny remote-controlled demolition vehicle. It was an expensive, clumsy, and often useless gadget that looked like a superweapon on paper, but in reality got stuck in the first deep puddle it encountered. But when the steel and high-quality explosives ran out, the Reich pivoted to the tactics of invisible death. How do you make a mine that no mine detector can find? The answer turned out to be shockingly simple and cheap. Glass, concrete, and gasoline bottles for desperate suicide squads. The last malice, imagine a sapper crawling across a minefield while his detector remains silent because what's under the ground isn't metal, but ordinary glass. The Glasmine 43 was Hitler's final act of spite. X-rays couldn't detect the glass shards, leaving field surgeons powerless. Soldiers simply rotted alive while the Reich tried to stall its inevitable end. By the end of the war, German industry had shifted to scavenger mode. Metal became a luxury, so mines began to be cast from concrete or pressed cardboard. The famous shoe mine 42, housed in a wooden box, cost pennies but maimed just as effectively as a steel one. When those ran out, incendiary bottles took over. A Molotov cocktail in the hands of a Berlin teenager against a Soviet T-34. That is the true face of the German defense in 1945. Even elite bayonets turned into simplified stumps of steel. The only bright spot remained the Luftwaffe paratroopers' gravity knife. It was an engineering trick. The blade slid out of the handle under its own weight. Originally designed to cut through parachute cords, it eventually became a legendary tool for close-quarters combat where ammunition no longer mattered. The price of technological madness. An arsenal that began with luxurious Lugers ended with broken glass and gasoline in wine bottles. What became of this mountain of iron after the red flag was raised over the Reichstag? You'd be surprised, but the ideas of the losers are still killing people in modern conflicts today. 6 years of war transformed Germany from the world's forge into a giant scrap heap. The journey from the golden luster of an officer's Luger to gasoline bottles and glass traps took only a few thousand days. Hitler bet on technology, but forgot one simple truth. Wars are won by economies and common sense, not blueprints. German weaponry is the clearest lesson in how excessive ego kills entire armies. While Reich engineers spent precious hours polishing screws, their factories were methodically turned to dust by Allied bombers. In the end, the soldiers of the Great Empire lived out their final hours with museum antiques or dangerous pipe clones in their hands. The ultimate irony is what happened next. The victors dragged German secrets back to their laboratories. The concepts of the intermediate cartridge, the general-purpose machine gun, and even the shape of the assault rifle became the foundation for all modern NATO and Eastern Bloc weaponry. The Reich rotted away, but its steel metastases continue to fire across the globe to this day, a reminder of the price of technological madness. Whose steel deserves the same ruthless breakdown next? Soviet sledgehammers, American might, or British conservatism? Let me know in the comments which army you think is the most overrated, and don't forget to subscribe. Here, we tell the truth that makes your ears ring.